Okay, I see that sound is not great as usual. But let's turn it up a little bit, see if we can. Okay. So before we get going on the lecture, we have a couple things coming up. March 25th, which is next week, I believe, you have application assignment 2 due. That's myths and psychology. It is much easier than application assignment 1. I like to get the difficult one out of the way first, although I'm thinking in the future, maybe I'll switch them up because, yeah, that first introduction to application assignments is hard. And then actually that should be April 6th for your midterm. It's due the 6th, but it'll be open a couple days, just like the last one was. But that's still a little ways away. It'll be, you know, chapter 6 through 10. We're on chapter 9 now. We're starting chapter 9 now. And then we'll have one more, the sexuality and gender chapter, which is chapter 10, and then there'll be the midterm. Let me see who came here. Mark. All right, let me. Okay. So any questions on where we are? Well, let me fix this actually. You guys good? Okay. So motivation and emotion. We're going to be talking about motivation today. This is a, you know, big, lots of stuff going on here. This is really an overview chapter. Emotion has, you know, just motivation has been big for a long time. We're interested in why we do things. Emotion has been increasingly a focus of research. I remember they started a new journal, Emotion Review or something, since I've been doing research, so pretty recently. And it's, you know, it's very important. So we're going to start with motivation. The physiological or psychological factors that account for arousal, direction, and persistence of behavior. So arousal is that initial, okay, so arousal is the feeling, that initial thing that gets you moving towards or interested in doing something. The direction is the direction of your behavior. Persistence is how long it happens. So we're going to look at it in detail in a minute. Your text defines it as the process by which activities are started, directed, and continued so that physical or psychological needs or wants are met. So there are different aspects of it. The factor or motivational state that prompts the behavior, that's the arousal, okay? The goal towards which the behavior is directed, and the reasons for differences in the intensity and duration of the behavior. Still, again, we come down to the basic question, why do we do things? That's what we're trying to answer here. So before we go on, and I'll cover this a little bit later too, motivation can be thought of in two broad categories. Intrinsic, that means you do something because it is rewarding in itself to do it. All the motivation or desire or drive to do something comes from within you. The rewards are internal, okay? Versus extrinsic, and extrinsic motivation comes from the outside. So you do something because of outcomes external to yourself. So extrinsic motivation could be pay for your work, right? Or something you're doing. Okay, it could be a prize, recognition, and so forth. Most things in life are a little bit of both, right? So for example, I like to teach. It's intrinsically motivating for me to explain certain things. Some things I like to teach more than others, but it is intrinsically motivating. But there's no way on earth I'd be here talking to you if someone weren't paying me. My extrinsic motivation for actually being here and getting out of bed and driving my Celia is extrinsic. Okay, it's paid, right? Comes from the outside. A lot of things are like that. Take music. So musicians need a lot of intrinsic motivation. They have to love to do music because the extrinsic motivation is kind of iffy, right? And yet they also do it for extrinsic reasons, for money, right? So they can eat, or fame. Maybe they want to be another Justin Bieber. Okay, right? There's a lot of intrinsic and extrinsic in there, and you need a little bit of both to really want, to really have that motivation to do most things. Take studying. I like to study and learn things. Okay. I have an intrinsic motivation to learn. I love to learn. And sometimes I learn things that are totally frivolous and I don't need to learn. But when it comes down to actually studying, I got a lot of degrees. I wouldn't have done it if there hadn't been the motivation of, hey, I've actually paid for this course, so I better get out of bed every day. And to get to learn, actually later to get a job, etc. So there's always a little bit of both, almost always. I learn a lot about some things for no reason, like about plants. I just like to. Okay, theories of motivation. So these are different explanations people have, that researchers have had, for why we do things. Biological theories really focus on biological or physiological processes, okay? Things that we didn't have to learn, things that are meeting basic needs, okay? We'll cover more about that. Cognitive theories really focus on for how you're processing information from your environment to determine what you want to do, your motivation for things. Cognitive consistency theories. This is the idea that we're motivated to act in accordance with our beliefs and to believe things that aren't in contradiction with themselves. Okay, there's a motivation to get rid of inconsistency between beliefs and behaviors because that's unpleasant. We don't feel good when we do something that we don't think we should be doing. We've all been there. We're familiar with this feeling. We don't want to do it. So theories that explain the drive in terms of motivation, in terms of achieving cognitive consistency are called consistency theories. And then we have some specific motives such as hunger, sex. Now these are also pretty much biological, but we're going to talk about hunger specifically here. Okay, so let's start with instinct approaches. So this is biological, right? First, I want to mention that ethology is the study of animal behavior under natural conditions. This allows scientists to learn about these biological drives, the instincts that animals have without being contaminated by humans. Now, you can study animal behavior in any conditions, like psychologists study animal behavior, right? Not usually under natural behaviors. That's why natural conditions. That's why they're not ethologists, right? A lab is not a natural condition. This helps people understand the motivation. So, instincts approach just assumes that people act the way they do because of instinct in a way similar to how animals act. So animals have more instincts. Animals, ducks are hatched and their instinct is to follow the mother, right? They will therefore follow anything bigger than them that is available if there's not a mother duck. So will geese. There's a cute little movie about that. Foals, baby horses. They will, unless they're sick, they will get up and look for the mother to nurse right away. Okay. Instincts are the biologically determined and innate patterns of behavior. That's what we're born with. Those exist in our genetic code. And it's behaviors. You don't have to learn them. They're not reflexes. A reflex, you get, physical one just by banging on your knee, right? They're not reflexes in this terms of classical conditioning. They're just things we don't need to learn, and they're triggered by certain events. So with ducks, it's basically getting born and seeing something big walking around, and they hope it's their mother. Let's have a little pause and okay, more biological theory, drive reduction theory. Basically, we're motivated to reduce, the idea here is we want to reduce physiological imbalances and return to homeostasis. And that's that balanced state. We talked about that in chapter a long time ago. And we're going to talk a little bit more now. Okay, what's a drive? And that is just a motivational state that results from a physiological need, like hunger, thirst, sex. You've all heard the word sex drive. We are motivated to replicate our genes, to reproduce. So your textbook definition, your text just says that drive reduction theory assumes that behavior arises from the physiological needs that cause internal drives to reach homeostasis, right? To satisfy a need and get rid of tension and arousal. Need, it's just a requirement of something that's essential to food or water, basic survival, right? And a drive is that push towards doing something that comes up when there's a need that you need to fulfill. So psychological tension and physical arousal. Arousal in this sense means awake, alert, heart beating, etc. So homeostasis, again, that's the tendency of the body to maintain a steady state and balance, right? And drives, we have primary drives, is what I've been talking about so far, hunger and thirst. But we have a lot of acquired or secondary drives. We talked about primary and secondary when we talk about reinforcers, right? Primary reinforcers, things like food. Secondary are things that have been associated with primary reinforcers. And acquired drives are learned through experience or conditioning, remember? And they're everything that's not like this basic survival drive, like the need for money, social status, right? And we want something because we want to satisfy what we've learned to understand as a basic need. Causes us discomfort and psychological distress to not have it. So here's a little example of a primary drive, which is food, right? To eat, right? Homeostasis is maintained with the help of your body if it's functioning normal. So you're hungry, that's your imbalance, you eat. Eating increases the circulation of glucose in your blood. Also causes leptin to be released that tells you you're full and you're not going to need to eat anymore. So you stop eating. And after a while, your glucose is lowered. And you're hungry again, and it goes over and over. And this is another slide. One of them is from your textbook. I can't remember which, okay? But this is basically the same thing. I included both of them because I don't remember where I got this one, but I kind of like it. Physiological need, you have a drive, you have a motivation, goal-directed behavior. You eat, you achieve it, etc. Now, when it comes to hunger, this process gets interrupted artificially, and that's when we get issues, overeating or undereating issues, right? It can also be interrupted by other things, like if you're not producing leptin, we'll talk about that in a minute, or insulin. Okay, so we've been talking about physiological needs. What about psychological needs? So McClellan, among other things, proposed 3 psychological needs: need for achievement, need for affiliation, and need for power. Okay, need for achievement is just the desire to succeed in attaining goals, to reaching your goals, sometimes realistic, sometimes challenging, sometimes minor, sometimes major. It varies from person to person. There are individual differences in this and all of these. Remember we talked about individual differences? How any kind of trait or construct varies from individual to individual. Need for affiliation? That's just the need for social interactions and relationships. Again, some people, just like there are some people who really are driven to achieve, to really big goals, right? Some people need more social interaction than others. Others' need for affiliation is met with not so much. In fact, they don't want to be around people as much. Then we have need for power. That's just the need to have control or influence. Again, it can be in minor, it's just in your local community, or you know, Hitler, Putin right now. Great need for power there. So personality and need for achievement. So like I said, the need for achievement varies from person to person, right? And Carol Dweck has a self-theory of motivation, and she and many other people believe that your need for achievement is really related to your personality, okay? Including your view of yourself, as well as other personality factors, right? So Carol Dweck talked about fixed and growth mindset. And this has become a pretty important theory here. So mindset is your approach to learning things, to growth, to changing in your life, right? If you have a fixed mindset, you believe that you can't really change anything. So you can't change your intelligence, you're born with what you got. You're born bad at math or good at math, bad at writing, good at not writing. You're just born that way. Growth mindset is the attitude that you can improve your ability. You can become smarter. You can learn math or music or whatever flips your switch, right? Now, growth mindset has been associated with a lot of good things. Teachers who speak, who have a growth mindset tend to treat their students as if they're all capable of learning, versus teachers who have a fixed mindset tend to give up on, so they're just bad at math, okay? Anybody in authority can have that influence. If you teach your children that they can learn anything, you're having a growth mindset, and they will actually be capable of learning a lot more. So these things have been shown to matter. Older people, older students, teenagers, adults with a growth mindset tend to do better when they're tackling challenging things because they think they can learn. So it is quite important. Another thing that influences your, not only your need for achievement, your willingness to actually try, is your locus of control. Locus of control is just where you think the main control and causes of the things that happen to you exist. So you have internal versus external. Internal is the belief that you can change things. You can affect important, meaningful change and cause things in your life to have a difference, right? You control your future. External locus of control is kind of the idea that other things control your future. God, fate, other people, destiny. Maybe you think, well, I can't learn that because I grew up here, right? Or my parents are what have determined that I'm where I am. Now, there's a statute of limitations on blaming your parents, even though we know as psychologists that how you're brought up does matter. At some point, hopefully, you get that external locus of control together with your growth mindset, and you go out, advocate for yourself and change, right? Internal locus of control is associated with, again, more achievement, more self-confidence, self-efficacy, so forth. Okay, so moving on to arousal theory, need for stimulation. So people are said to have an optimal level of tension that they try to maintain. Some people are sensation seekers, and we'll see a little bit more about that later, but they want a really high level of stimulation or tension. They thrive on it. They thrive on the challenge. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's mental, maybe they like risk, okay? Other people are very uncomfortable with high levels of stimulation, of arousal, risk, right? They work best when they are under less stimulation. Now, for everybody, the optimal level of stimulation tends to vary according to the task that's in front of us, okay? Optimal level theory, body functions best at specific level of arousal. Again, individual differences, everybody's different. Okay, people who need for a high level of stimulation will seek more exciting things and vice versa, right? So more on the arousal approach, stimulus motive. This is just, it's anything that causes an increase in stimulation, a motive, usually unlearned. Or apparently unlearned, I should say. For arousal theory, I just said this, they're trying to maintain this perfect amount of tension for them. Sensation seeker is someone who needs more arousal than the average person. Now, as I was saying, for everybody, even though we're different in our optimal level normally, performance is related to arousal or stimulus intensity. And moderate levels of arousal tend to lead to better performance, either high or low. But there's an interaction effect in that easy tasks, people tend to perform easy tasks better if they have a high moderate level of arousal, whereas difficult tasks are better with a low moderate level. Why is this? Because if it's a difficult task, higher arousal means you're more likely to get frustrated and impatient, right? And easy tasks, you're going to get bored if they're not aroused enough. So here's a little diagram of it. You can see on the y-axis performance, arousal level on the x-axis. And so for difficult tasks, we see that people are opting to get higher performance at a slightly lower level of arousal than people who are doing an easy task. Does that make sense? Okay. So back to sensation seekers. I'm a sensation seeker. That's me on a racehorse, on the smaller racehorse on the top. And that's me going down a crazy slide right there. Who's done a river slide? Nobody's done. Okay, I got to show you guys this. This is highly entertaining. You got to be a little nuts, but those of us who are sensation seekers, we are very easily seduced by the idea of doing something that to other people might look absolutely insane. So, yep, very fun. It's very scary when you're at the top, but it's also very fun. See that top, very scary. Yeah. Anyway, that is on the Washon Fork of the Middle Fork of the Two Leaf River. It's on Washon. So you have to go up. So remember when I showed you guys pictures of the river with trash? Okay, so that's on a different fork of the Tule River. That's on the Middle Fork on 190. This you have to go up and then to the left. But yeah, it's called the Washon Slide, I think. It's really fun. You can't go too early or you'll get dead. But it's pretty nice and it's really deep underneath, so you won't get dead going down. You have to be very careful on the river because you have to make sure that the place you're jumping or sliding into is deep enough and it's not full of rocks so you don't get mushed. The power of the water at the bottom of slides like that is insane. So this one's safe though. It's just very tall. Scary at the top. It's fun. My son won't do it. I keep urging him to, but he won't. My other one hasn't been there, but I know he would. So we're going to have our discussion today is about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So we talked a little bit about social media, I think, last time. And we are going to see more about social media later. But social media is a really good example for talking about motivation. So why do we do the things we do on motivation, on social media, I should say. So to what extent is social media intrinsic and extrinsic? Okay. How do social media companies capitalize on this? What do they do to keep you coming back, right? Okay. How do they take advantage of existing motivation, like peers, etc.? And how does this feel to you personally? Okay, so we're gonna have 2 groups of 3 here. This class is getting smaller and smaller. It's getting bigger online, and then I'll put you guys online in groups. So go ahead and form 2 groups up here. And I'm gonna do a breakout room here. Oops.